Hi guys, welcome to week 3. Thank you for all your responses. I'll get to grading this week for sure. Thank you for your patience. So this week we are covering the story of Bonnie and Clyde, which is one of my areas of expertise. It's one of my favorite stories to tell for many different reasons. Because I think it draws a lot of parallels to now, as well as really is a story of the Great Depression and its effects and how it affected young people and how young people operate and perceive in these crazy times. And to me, it's a very tragic love story because it is a love story, and we'll talk about that in the lecture. This lecture is probably going to get a little long. It's usually something that takes me about an hour and 15 minutes, sometimes into 2 class periods. So bear with me. I'm probably going to fast forward through a lot of things. The video the video and the article that we have some good information as well. So just bear with me on because usually I do this standing up and I get to wave my arms around and then yell and scream, and it's, this will be my first time doing it as here online to you guys. But since it is my passionate topic, I want you guys to hear my voice on it. So I'm going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint. Sorry. Yes. So you've heard the story of Jesse James, of how he lived and died. If you are still in need of something to read, here is the story of Bonnie and Clyde. So I'm going to go a little bit into Clyde and Bonnie's upbringing. Clyde, they were both from pretty poor families. We're both from a place called West Dallas. It was unincorporated. It was so due to a lot of the drought and a lot of the crops failing and the market crashing for those crops, a lot of farmers in Texas had to move. It's there's lots of migration stories out of the Great Depression. One of them is the growth of West Dallas. So West Dallas was unincorporated. While Bonnie and Clyde were both from West Dallas, Bonnie's family had maybe just a little bit more money and resources. Could also be because they had less children. Um, but like I said, West Dallas was unincorporated. There was no running water. There weren't plumbing, like there weren't police patrols out there. It was known as the Devil's Back Porch. And so that was a little bit of their upbringing. Clyde's family had moved from Eastern Texas after their small farm failed. His parents had kind of opened up a uh, bicycle repair shop / kind of convenience store out of their home. They were doing that in West Dallas. I don't think I ever really figured out what Bonnie's parents were actually doing for a living, but they were there. So January 1930, Bonnie and Clyde meet in Dallas. It's believed that they met at a diner that they were both working at. In February of 1930, Clyde gets jailed in Waco for petty crimes. He actually escapes from jail because Bonnie smuggles a gun into the jail for him. One of the themes I need you to know about Clyde is he is a slippery little snake. And that's one of the things I want to point out with some of these people that we talk about. Jesse James is one of, I mean, it's a very similar, you see a lot of very similar themes between Clyde and Jesse James. But Clyde is a very intelligent young man, and he's good at planning things. and he just seems to have a knack for escaping hairy situations. And these are all true. This isn't fiction, guys. This is real life, and it's one of the reasons I love this story. So in March of 1930, Clyde gets captured in Ohio. He gets extradited to Texas. If you're jailed for petty crimes and then you escape from prison, things get a little worse for you. So he gets sentenced to 14 years in a place called Eastham Prison Farm, which is a very, very terrible place. There were tortures, um, uh, beatings, no food. There were killings, 16-hour work days. So this was a work farm. If I get ahead of myself on some of these, just bear with me. And they had to jog 2 miles to the work site, work for 16 hours, and then jog all the way back to prison. And so Clyde did some things while in prison. He saved a prisoner's life from being beaten to death. It kind of started this very simmering anger within Clyde. In fact, I believe I have here it changed. Prison changed him from schoolboy to rattlesnake. And so he may have killed a fellow inmate who was working as an enforcer for the guards. In the meantime, while Clyde's in prison, his brother Buck is robbing businesses to give money to his mother so that they can get a lawyer to get him paroled. Basically, it's the Great Depression. It's the 1930s, and Clyde's mother wrote a letter stating that she needs her son back because his work and income would be needed to support the family. So he does get paroled in February of 1932. He does take a job in Massachusetts with family. It didn't work out. Clyde is not capable of working for whatever reason. I'm going to let you guys try to decipher that. For whatever reason, Clyde is not, he can't take direction well. He's not capable of focusing on one thing. What does that sound like? Autism and ADHD is what it sounds like to me. Super powerful brain, not pointed in a great direction. So he got a group together that so he never worked again. After Massachusetts, he came back to Texas and never did actually work an honest job ever again. He got his group together, and they robbed things. Basically were robbing stores, robbing whatever they could. In between Texas and New Mexico. They ended up buying some guns and some bulletproof vests. As they tested out those bulletproof vests, they realized they were not effective. And that's another story that's kind of part of this, is not just criminals, but law enforcement during the 30s is trying new tactics and trying new things to combat some of these. We'll talk a little bit about the FBI that's emerging at this time. And so anyways, sorry, it's a bad purchase. The guns and the vests all around were a bad purchase. When they did rob banks, or they didn't rob very many banks, I'm sorry. When they did rob, they did share that money with their friends and family. So that does, like Jesse James, kind of give them a Robin Hood-ish persona. Whew. Okay. Now, Bonnie and Clyde are the Barrow Gang. I'm sure you all have read how they rob and steal, and those who squeal are usually found dying or dead. So they're on the run. They're doing their thing. Another big point in the Bonnie and Clyde story is Electra, Texas. The car breaks down, and they run in with city police, who consider them to be suspicious. They end up taking the police hostages. They let the cops go at a ranch. They took a mail carrier. They ended up taking a mail car and its carrier hostage. They ended up leaving the mail carrier on the side of the road. They even shared food with him. one of the things that is always in the background of Clyde's mind is a prison break at Eastham. He wants revenge on how he was treated. So Bonnie goes in, like they're kind of fooling things out or feeling things out. Bonnie goes in as a messenger to talk to some of uh Clyde's former friends in prison. um they bought ammo. They tried to go back and steal guns. So she goes in, they steal a couple of big cars to try to plan this prison break. They go back to buy ammo. They buy ammo at a store. They go back to steal the guns, and it doesn't work out. It's raining cats and dogs. It's a crazy storm. The cars get stuck in the mud, so they end up stealing mules until they managed to come up on a house. Then they stole the car of a local doctor. One of the people that ran with them was a guy named by the last name of Foltz. Foltz and Bonnie got caught. They actually got Foltz got shot um, during this run with law enforcement, and the doctor whose car they stole actually refused to treat Foltz's injury because the guy had just stole his car. um Bonnie spends time in jail. She writes a story called the Story of Suicide Sal. Bonnie is a talented and prolific writer. In fact, she's the one who wrote the poem that I am reciting to you. No charges were ever filed against Bonnie. In fact, it's believed that she kind of charmed um the jail keeper or the sheriff basically and his wife. They would bring her food. She would spend time at their house. And so it's another thing that is a theme with Bonnie and Clyde. Both are extremely charming, charismatic, talented, creative people. Keep that in mind as we go through this story. Um, Clyde is on the loose. He finally has a successful arms robbery. He robs a jewelry store and filling station that's owned by a man named John Bucker, however you want to say it. I've tried to underline all of the people who Clyde has killed because the body count does start to stack up. So he ends up killing Bucker. Bonnie ends up joining, gets out of the story, joins Clyde in Wichita Falls, and the story begins kind of as we know it. The BAR is the oh gosh, the Brown's automatic rifle. I can't believe it's blanking on me now. I'll look that up and share that here in a second. So Clyde forms a gang, and why they are so successful as robbers is also very similar to why gangs in the Wild West were successful. There's no money. We're in the middle of the Great Depression. Cities, states, and our federal government have no money. So there's no money for law enforcement. Like, there's not resources. You've got a few patrolmen, you've got a few cars, you might be able to afford a detective, but there's not a lot. Um, especially in rural areas. There's almost nothing for effective law enforcement. Um, and so 1932, there are 4 murders attributed to the Barrow Gang. They actually crashed a barn dance in southeastern Oklahoma. When they were confronted, they killed the officers. One of the men that they killed was a man named Eugene Moore. He was a husband and he was a father, and he took the law enforcement job because his farm had failed. And that was the only jobs available, was very low paying government jobs. And so I thought that's also a story. Like, a lot of these law enforcement officers that are dealing with Bonnie and Clyde, that are dealing with some of these other public enemy personas that we'll talk about, they're not trained, hardened cops. Like, they're farmers. They're farmers and, shopkeepers, and like, they're not made for this. And we see this throughout the story of Bonnie and Clyde. So the state of the economy in 1932, 1 in 3 couldn't find jobs. Shanty towns that were popping up were actually worse than West Dallas. One of these shanty towns actually popped up by the federal Capitol building. It was known as the Bonus Army. They were vets that wanted a bonus that had been promised to them in the future. They wanted it now. But moving back to Bonnie and Clyde, they're on the run, and they go to New Mexico. At the time, once again, there is not really an effective FBI, and these are all state crimes, and so law enforcement can't pursue state to state. So they go stay with Bonnie's Aunt Nellie. Well, Aunt Nellie's not impressed with Clyde or the Barrow Gang. She gets suspicious, and she calls the local police. Raymond Hamilton is another player. In fact, he's kind of their third, like he's in and out, but he's a part of the gang, at least in the beginning. Aunt Nellie calls the police. Bonnie gives them a warning. They end up taking a man named Deputy Johns hostage. They head back to Texas. A very large search ensued. They go through Kermit, Monahans, and Crane when they should have really gone to Mexico. They actually let Johns go and give him money to get home. So they're not, when asked several times why they kill, both Clyde and Buck, his brother, who ends up becoming part of the equation, say that they killed it was a kill or be killed situation. So moving on a little bit to another topic of interest here. Clyde preferred the Ford V8. He preferred it because it had a large V8 engine. It had a reinforced steel body. It could hold 5 passengers. It came with a spare tire, and it could do 90 miles an hour. It topped out at 90, but could do 78 on average. And so there's actually supposedly a letter where Clyde writes a letter to Henry Ford thanking him for making the V8 or the Ford V8 so wonderful and so effective. It's believed that that letter is probably false, but cute little myth, I think. One of the issues also is the people didn't keep a lot of gasoline in their cars because of the Great Depression. They would keep enough gas to get to the store or get to work. They didn't fill up their tanks. And so a lot of times, there's a slide where I talk about they find these Ford V8s scattered all over the Midwest because once they run out of gas, they got to go steal another one. In fall of 1932, they end up taking Raymond back to Michigan. They spend time in the Midwest. It's believed that they actually spent a lot of time in Kansas City, kind of living it up. Living on the run was costly, but in the beginning, they were living a pretty decent lifestyle. They had fun in Kansas City. They went to theaters and shows and ate out and lived kind of a high lifestyle. And like I said, there were random Fords found throughout the region, which was an indicator that they were there. There's not any testimony, just a little bit of writings here and there that they were there. In October, they kill a man named Howard Hall, who was a butcher. Rewards are starting to be offered. Things take a turn in November of 1932 nationally that affect how things are working. FDR gets elected as our president, and so he's going to make some changes to help us through the Great Depression. A man named Schmid is elected as a Dallas County sheriff. He actually adds a patrols division to the law enforcement, and so Dallas is kind of a scary place to be because they are on patrol looking for Bonnie and Clyde. Also at the end of that year, Raymond Hamilton gets picked up in Michigan. He gets identified as Clyde's crime partner and sent back to Dallas. He actually gets charged with the murder of Booker Um, and even though it was actually Clyde. White men rarely get the electric chair, and so that was not something that was concerned. So Hamilton's out. A man or a young man, actually almost a boy, named W.D. Jones joins the Barrow Gang, or joins Bonnie and Clyde on their runs. Um, so Christmas of 1932, Clyde and WD try to steal a new car. They kill the owner, who's a husband, father. He was the age of 27. Clyde made WD climb telephone poles to cut wires so nobody could call law enforcement. Um, Once again, they are looking at, Hamilton got sent to Easton Prison Farm. And so once again, they're looking at helping Hamilton escape. Um, so they go to visit Hamilton's family in January of 1933 to kind of make a plan for this escape. And it was actually a trap set for somebody else. So the Hamilton family, not known for being criminals, they were actually trying to set them up for a different reason, and the Barrow Gang kind of walks right into it. Gunfight happens, of course, and they killed Tarrant County Deputy Sheriff Malcolm Davis. He was age 51. He was a bachelor. And so we're having the bodies stack up here a little bit. But they are still trying to figure out how to break Hamilton out of jail. One of the things that law enforcement ran into was friends and neighbors of the Hamiltons and the Barrows never saw a thing, mostly because of the cash payments or presents that were given to them by Bonnie and Clyde and gang. Raymond ends up mentioning a Raymond ends up mentioning a woman during transfer after an escaped attempt, because he tried to escape. And this runs in the newspaper. This is actually Bonnie's first public mention. She was not part of the scenario. Nobody was pinning anything on her until Raymond runs his mouth. Also, Clyde's mother shared defenses of her own son with local newspapers. She was trying to generate sympathy, so that if he did get picked up, his sentence wouldn't be so bad. There are a lot of untruths to their write-ups. They are not so merciless as that. They hate all the laws, the stool pigeons, spotters, and rats. If a policeman is killed in Dallas and they have no clues to guide, if they can't find a fiend, they just wipe the slate clean and hang it on Bonnie and Clyde. Basically, the point of that stanza is it got to a point where anytime something went down, maybe it was Bonnie and Clyde. And so it also kind of makes history research difficult, because people will publish things that are not true, but that's the only sources we have. So just think about that. They have a run-in in Springfield with a bike officer named Purcell. They take him hostage. They let him go in Joplin, so they don't kill him. I have here, did Bonnie drive? That's a question that a lot of historians claimed. There are some witnesses that say that Bonnie was a getaway driver. Blanche Burrow, as someone we'll talk about here in a second, Blanche Burrow was the wife of Buck Burrow, and in her account, she claims that Bonnie never drove. Once again, we also have to, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we do have to question Blanche's account. I've read her account of the whole thing is published. I've read it. I recommend it. And so if that's what you're interested in. But one of the things that you read in Blanche's account of what happened is it's never her or Buck's fault. And she's not trying to incriminate anyone. And so we can't really trust Bonnie or Blanche as a source. This next stanza kind of prefaces another incident. So, if they try to act like citizens and rent them a nice little flat, about a third night they're invited to fight by a submachine gun rat tat tat. So Blanche and Buck have joined them. Neither one are very bright. Buck has never had a real job. Buck has just been released. They go to join Bonnie and Clyde in Joplin for a vacation where they rent kind of a little flat cabin type thing in the area. They shopped, they went to movies. Blanche cooked. They backed the car in the garage for an easy escape. They were living life pretty decently, but of course, since nobody has jobs, money's running out. So they start up robberies again, and they stole guns. They end up stealing a car. Bonnie and Clyde have a get into a physical altercation over the stolen car because Bonnie knew what was going to happen, as did Clyde. So he knew that they were, it was hot. They were hot, that they needed to get out. People were starting to track them. However, police officers show up before they can escape. And this is actually where we get all of the pictures that we have. So in April of 1932, 2 officers are killed in a shootout with the gang in their garage apartment in Joplin, Missouri. Wes Harriman, 42 years old, former farmer, went into the garage after Clyde gets killed. Harry McGinnis, engaged widower, also gets killed. WD is shot but not fatally wounded. He actually has to move the police car out of the way so that they can make it into the car. Blanche is out running around chasing after her little dog. Clyde also gets injured. Unfortunately, they the little dog is Blanche is not able to find her little dog, which is sad. But police found a camera that they had been taking pictures of each other with. They also found Buck and Blanche's marriage license, which confirms the identity. And so this shootout, the Joplin shootout, is what is letting the rest of the public know who these people are and for sure what is going on. And so they're on the run again, and law enforcement knows who they are, and now they have orders to shoot to kill. This isn't a bring them in. This is a shoot to kill order for law enforcement. A newsboy once said to his buddy, "I wish old Clyde would get jumped. In these hard, awful times, we'd make a few dimes if 5 or 6 cops would get bumped." So he's basically saying that Clyde produces headlines. They class them as cold-blooded killers. They say they are heartless and mean. But I say this with pride that I once knew Clyde when he was honest, upright, and clean. But the law fooled around, kept tracking him down and locking him up in a cell, till he said to me, "I will never be free, so I will meet a few of them in hell." So they have so after this, they kind of have a multi-week run through middle states. This is where the story loses its romance. We've got 5 people. We got Buck, Blanche, Bonnie, Clyde, and WD all crammed into a car. They don't have a lot of money. It's hard to get food because they may be recognized, so hunger is an issue. Buck and Clyde often fought over where to rob or who to rob. Bonnie and Blanche also clashed. Blanche really thought Bonnie really thought Blanche was pretty dumb, which she kind of was. And so it wasn't a great situation, as you can imagine. They end up stealing a car in Los Angeles, and WD drives off. He gets chased by the owner, and then a neighbor. The owner is Darby. The neighbor was a man named Stone. Um, they caught up with Clyde. They got taken hostage. Bonnie enjoyed the company. She writes in her memoir. She actually asked Darby, who was a mortician or an undertaker. She actually asked Darby to be their undertaker. And they actually gave those two hostages money to get home. Um, so coming up, we've got kind of a tragedy, an accident, I guess. This road was so dimly lighted, there were no highway signs to guide, but they made up their minds, if the roads were all blind, they wouldn't give up till they died. So they're on the run. They make a visit back to Texas. They escape a holdup in Lucerne, Indiana. Basically, accounts said that they shot up the town. Um, they said that women were also shooting, which is hard to believe. Um, One of the funny things about that incident in Lucerne is they actually were on the run and there was like a herd of pigs or somebody, there were pigs in the road and they killed two actual pigs, not pigs as a euphemism for cop, but they killed two actual pigs with the car. They end up robbing a bank in Minnesota. It's one of the only banks they actually robbed. Most of their hauls were actually very small. Their largest haul was around $4,000, which when we talk about John Dillinger and gang, I mean, their largest hauls were up in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so Bonnie and Clyde are actually small time criminals. They go back to Texas. One of the ways that they let families know that they're in the area is throwing a Coke bottle with messages in their yards at night. Um, if there was, if Bonnie's mother and Clyde's mother would communicate these visits by talking about red beans and cabbage over the phone, because their phones were being tapped. If you ever read the book The Highwayman, or not read the book, see the movie The Highwayman, it's it's the law enforcement side of tracking down Bonnie and Clyde. It's on the boring side, but also lots of good information. Red beans and cabbage were Bonnie's favorite, and so that was the code slang. Clyde's little sister got bullied in school over Clyde's crimes, but Clyde felt bad about it, and I believe bought her a new dress or bought her some new things to make her feel better. Um, they end up rejoining WD. He drives off during the Darby Stone chase. Buck and Blanche go off and do their own thing, so they're not really here at this time. And they're trying to reconnect, which leads directly to this tragedy. So in June of 1933, they're supposed to meet in this bridge in Sayre, Oklahoma. Clyde was late. He was driving very fast. He missed the detours for the bridge out sign. And he basically soars into the riverbed and just smashes into the riverbed. Bonnie gets badly injured. She has a compound fracture in her leg. The bone is sticking out. Also, battery acid is leaking. The car is on fire. It's a dry riverbed, by the way. Two witnesses are actually sitting on a front porch in a farmhouse and see this all go down. They help get them to the house. They're trying to find a doctor to get Bonnie seen. One of the men figures out this is obviously an interesting situation and goes out to call the sheriff. The Barrow gang waited for Leo, end up taking the family hostage. They actually offered to pay the family for the food and the medical care, and the family, of course, declined and said that that was, their Christian duty. But the point of this story is Bonnie is now severely and potentially fatally injured. I mean, it's not like they can go to the hospital. And so it's definitely an issue. The road gets dimmer and dimmer. Sometimes you can hardly see. Still, it's fight man to man and do all you can. for you know they can never be free. Um, so like I'm said, Bonnie is close to death. WD and Clyde are also injured. They head back to Kansas and rent a cabin. They ended up moving to Fort Smith, Arkansas. They were able to get to a doctor in Fort Smith that didn't know them. One of the things I want to point out here is so Clyde took care of Bonnie. He fed her, he carried her to the bathroom, he got her drugs, he risked going all the way back to Texas to get her sister to bring her back to Fort Smith to care for her. He could have left her. Bonnie was a liability at this point. I mean, the she like the bandages for all like it ends up, you know, drawing attention. The fact that they're having to buy all these bandages and medicine, not to mention he could still be on the run, not being in place where potential law enforcement may find him. And so to me, this is an indication of the fact that they really did love each other. Like this, what like they weren't just two kids in an adventure together. Like he could have totally ditched her. And to be fair, she might not have been charged with anything, like if she would have been picked up at this point. Um, so just keep that in mind as you answer the discussion questions. Buck and WD end up crashing the car after robbing a grocery store. They have a shootout with law enforcement officers and kill Arkansas Marshal Henry Humphrey. July 1933, Bonnie is still not okay. She's barely able to care for himself. The FBI starts investigating the Kansas City massacre. We'll talk about that in a different segment. But the FBI is picking up and they're starting to jump into this fight. They're not quite involved yet, but they're pretty close. Let's see. So they're hiding out in Platte, Missouri. Actually, so they actually rob an armory in Enid, Oklahoma, where they have BARs and ammo. They're hiding out in Platte City, Missouri, where they rent cabins. They attracted attention due to covering up the windows and buying meals for a bunch of people, as well as medical supplies for Bonnie, which attract local sheriff. An officer named Coffee puts together. So this is another indication of just how lucky or slippery or genius Clyde is. Officer Coffee, I don't have his first name here, I'm sorry, pulls together a dozen lawmen, so 12 people, an armored car, and shields. So they have shields, an armored car, and they pull up to the garage. They go to Buck and Blanche's cabin first. Blanche said that she was naked and indecent, and needed them to wait for a second. In the meantime, Clyde noticed and opened fire on the armored car, which turned out wasn't that armored, and cripples the driver. Law enforcement officers open fire, but their weapons jam. And so they're not actually able to really effectively, like, while there are 12 of them, they really only have the firepower of about 6. Buck ends up getting shot in the head, but he doesn't die. He's not dead. It's not a fatal head wound. Blanche gets hit with fragments and glass from broken windows in the car that do end up blinding her. But they are able to escape. 12 law enforcement officers with shields and an armored car. So they stop frequently to nurse injuries. Buck is still alive. They actually head for Iowa, where they do some camping. Locals begin to notice burnt and bloody clothing at abandoned campsites. They kind of track them down. A posse surrounds the Barrow gang at an Iowa park in July 23rd of 1933. Some people brought dates for this roundup, like, we're all gonna go get Bonnie and Clyde. Shots get open, WD gets hit in the chest, Clyde gets hit in the shoulder. The car gets hung up, like high centered on a hill type deal. While they're trying to escape, Bonnie gets shot. Buck gets shot again and is fatally wounded. Bonnie and Jones are also wounded, but they are able to escape with Clyde on foot. So Bonnie and Clyde and Jones are able to escape on foot. Um, Buck's wife is blinded, gets shot by a shotgun pellet, and is captured. So she's got the glass and the shotgun pellet in her eye. She does eventually lose sight. In it, Buck, WD, and or Bonnie, Clyde, and WD cross a river. They rob a farm of its car. They look for a place to hide. So they're off on the run again. Buck dies of his injuries in a jail hospital a few weeks later. Um, One of the things that Buck does admit to killing Humphrey and 3 filling station robberies. Cumi Barrow was their mother's name. She was able to see her son before he died. Blanche is put in jail. At the time she's put in jail, she weighs 81 pounds. Blanche does not give anyone up. And you can see that in her version of the story. Like, she might not be bright, but she ain't no snitch either. So, and this is one of the things where they asked Buck, like, why he was so quick to kill. Buck said it was to not get hurt. It was to kill or be killed. Blanche pleads guilty to assault with intent to kill for the Platte City shootout, loses sight in her left eye, but does live to I believe, older adulthood. They find the car. They find 30 pistols in this abandoned car, and people picked over the sites for souvenirs, gun shell casings, just anything. And so Bonnie and Clyde and WD once again are on the run. They don't think they are too tough or desperate. They know the law always wins. They've been shot up before, but they do not ignore that death is the wages of sin. So at Buck's funeral, it was legend had it, and it's very unlikely that this is true, that that Clyde went to Buck's funeral dressed as an old woman. Very unlikely, as that they would have likely not been in the shape to travel. All 3 were nursing gunshot wounds. It was a very small funeral that law enforcement officers were at. Clyde's mother was asked to make a plea to Clyde, a public plea, to turn himself in. And she responded that she knew her son was on his last days and would let him live it as he pleased. Like, his only option either way was death. He'd killed, I mean, if you go back and count, I think we're up to about 13 law enforcement officers that he's murdered. He's gonna die either way. And so his mother, Cumi is her name once again, his mother is like, I'm not gonna, why would I want him to turn himself in? He's gonna die either way. So let him go out in a blaze of glory. So you can kind of wonder why Clyde was the way why he was, but also that's support, man. Like, that is parental support. Like, I know my son is insane. I'm just gonna let him enjoy what little left of life he has, regardless of consequences. Like, that's support right there. For heartbreak, some people have suffered. From weariness, some people have died. But take it all in all, our troubles are small till we get like Bonnie and Clyde. So Clyde, Bonnie, and WD stay pretty low. They recover. They end up robbing a National Guard armory in Illinois. They go to Mississippi. WD quits and he escapes and heads back to Texas. His name was never publicly mentioned, and so he wasn't arrested. Bonnie and Clyde go on. They do small robberies. Resources from family are what they're living off of because their money is gone. To be honest, this is worse than starving in West Texas. Like, at least in West Texas, they can pool resources with family and have enjoyment with family and friends. It's just those 2 on the run now. And so life isn't this glamorous adventure anymore. Like, the reality of what they have done is starting to sink in. In November of 1933, WD ends up getting turned in by friends or family or whoever. He spills everything. Unlike Blanche, who kept her mouth shut, WD spills everything. Said it was all Bonnie and Clyde, said that he was coerced, detailed the gun battles, claimed to be a minor at the time, said that he was handcuffed to Clyde throughout a lot of their adventures. It's probably not true. I can't, like, yeah, WD is a snitch. Um, so uh on November of or 21st of November was Cummy's 59th birthday. Um, there was an informant that knew of the meeting. Law enforcement officers actually set up an ambush for this meeting. They opened fire on the meeting. Clyde was able to get turned around and escape. Took a new car. 11 license plates were found in the old car. Bonnie and Clyde both get wounded. They go and recover in Oklahoma. They go back to Texas. Clyde is angry. Clyde is angry that law enforcement officers would fire on his own family. Also during this time, there's a tragedy. Bonnie's niece and nephew, who were twin babies, end up passing away. So let's talk, sorry, deep breath. Whew. Let's go back to Raymond Hamilton, who is still at Easton Prison Farm. He strikes a deal with a fellow inmate to arrange a prison break. The inmate gets out on parole and makes contact with Hamilton's brother, who makes contact with Bonnie and Clyde. And so this is now their plan for the prison break at Easton Prison Farm. 2 pistols are hidden on prison property. That's done. So they get smuggled in and get hidden there by Raymond. So January 16th, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde free gang member Raymond Hamilton and 3 others from Easton Prison Farm. Weapons were placed. The brother goes to visit Ray to let him know the date that's going to happen. And so January 16th, it's a foggy, damp morning. Once again, at Easton Prison Farm, they jog to work. And Ray changes squads on the way to work. And so guards go to and he's kind of running over by where the pistols are hidden. Guards go and try to get him back to change him to the squad he's supposed to be in. Him and another inmate find the pistols. A prison guard gets killed by the name of Croson. And the prison break ensues. So these prisoners escape with the pistols that they found after killing at least 1 prison guard. They meet up with Bonnie and Clyde and make the getaway vehicle. The story gets sensationalized. So there's kind of a new gang now. A newly gang gets formed. They start robbing businesses. There's not a cohesive. It's almost very similar to Jesse James's second gang. Like, Jesse James's first gang were battle-hardened guerrilla warriors. This gang is new and they're doing their own thing. 2 of the former inmates take off. 1 gets captured and spills everything. Hamilton is, of course, with them. A woman named Mary O'Dare joins as Hamilton's girlfriend. Nobody trusts her. She wants this glamorous life that she read about in the papers a few years ago with Bonnie and Clyde. Like, she wants to spend money and stay in hotels and have fancy clothes, but that's past for Bonnie and Clyde. Those days are over. Like, they can't even really effectively rob anymore. So they end up robbing a bank. It's the second bank that they attempted to rob. Raymond wanted to give his girlfriend a cut of the money. Clyde said no, but caught Raymond taking more and giving it to her anyways. The couple split up. Raymond eventually gets captured. Said that it was Bonnie that demanded the extra cut and not Mary. Clyde wrote him a letter and said that he should have killed him. And it is believed that that letter itself is legit, and I believe it sold for like $11,000 at an auction or something like that. And legend had it, dead or alive. Um, so on the reward, there was disagreement over whether dead or alive should be used, because did we want to bring Bonnie? I mean, did we want to kill Bonnie? Was so they ended up just being removed. So just a $1,000 reward for the capture. They left it vague. Okay, I am winding down, guys, so please bear with me. Frank Hamer is brought on the case. Kevin Costner plays his character in The Highwaymen. He's known as a gunslinging Texas Ranger. He may have killed 20 men. Other sources say he could have killed 50 men. In 1932, the same time FDR got elected, oh crap. Give me a second, guys. So a woman governor, or a woman becomes governor in Texas. And so sorry guys, sorry. She has a Ma Ferguson is her name. So Frank leaves the Texas Rangers because he doesn't want to work for a woman government. He actually goes and recreates all of Bonnie and Clyde's movements, which is close to about 1,400 miles. He works with the FBI and an agent named Bob Alcorn. It's not as easy as he thought. He's really struggling. So he's on the run, and people are, or he's on the hunt. Bonnie and Clyde are still on the run, killing people. April 1st of 1934, Texas Highway Patrol officers get killed near Grapevine. The couple visited family frequently. They had planned an Easter visit. Two law enforcement officers noticed the parked car. They went to check it out. A man named Henry Methvin was one of the prison breakies that stuck around. He shot one officer. Clyde killed the other one. Ed Wheeler was his name. His widow ended up becoming a law enforcement officer herself. She was always very resentful of the fame and romance that Bonnie and Clyde got because, they killed her husband. It wasn't romantic and an adventure to her. And then a man named H.D. Murphy, that was his first day on the job. He was supposedly engaged. Legend has it that Murphy's fiance wore her wedding dress to the funeral. This was believed to be true, but it was also unlikely to be the traditional wedding dress that we think of today. First of all, this was the 1930s. Nobody had any money. Second of all, this white wedding dress wasn't that relevant until later on. And so likely she just wore a new dress that she had purchased for her wedding that also would work for funerals as well. This all get blames on Bonnie, even though they're not exactly sure what she looks like. Roadblocks are slow to get put in place after this murder, and law enforcement does get criticized for their inability to move. A man named Manny Galt, who's played by Woody Harrelson in the movie, gets sent from the Texas Prison Authority, and he is there to join Hamer. So a few days later, they kill one more law officer and take another captive in Oklahoma. They are in northeast Oklahoma near the Oklahoma-Kansas, Missouri border. They stopped on the road to sleep. It gets reported to law enforcement. Oklahoma officer Cal Campbell and Percy Boyd approach the car. Campbell gets killed. Boyd gets taken hostage. Gang escapes. Boyd gets treated okay. His wound gets treated. He's released near Fort Scott, Kansas. They basically tell them that they have no fear and plenty of guns and ammo. They give him messages to share with with their family. Bonnie asks him to tell the public that she does not smoke cigars because there's a famous picture of her at the end of this PowerPoint where she has one in her mouth. He thought that Methvin was Hamilton. Hamilton got upset about that. Um, Legend has it that Clyde planned to have his stories published in detective magazines. Clyde sent angry letters to newspapers, sent one to the Ford Company, probably fake, sent one to Dallas officials blaming Hamilton for all of the killings, and then, of course, sent one to Hamilton that was likely real and sold at an auction for $16,000, not 11. My bad. They finally have a successful family meeting. Bonnie gives her mother a pet rabbit. The family is urging the couple to go to Mexico. But here's the situation. This depression is worldwide. It's not a specific to the United States thing. So it's not like Mexico had a lot of jobs and opportunities for two young people. Plus, they didn't speak the language. And so Mexico really wasn't a viable option. They spend a lot of time in Louisiana with Methvin's family. They are thinking of permanently locating there. FBI investigation and amps up. Phone taps begin. They start using the alias the Howards, which, if you go back to my PowerPoint on Jesse James, was the alias used by Jesse James. The name Henry gets mentioned, and he gets identified as a third person. And this is where they start to make contact with Henry's family and start to put some things together. And so Galt and Hamer make contact with Methvin's parents, Ivy and Avy. Go figure. They contact the local sheriff about their own concerns of their own safety. They described Clyde as a wolf, and they wanted immunity for Henry if they helped set up Bonnie and Clyde. Governor Ferguson gave consent to commute the Texas sentence that Methvin had been in prison for, but not for the Grapevine murders. And so if Methvin helped, he would, or if Methvin's parents helped, they would drop his old charges. He would only be dealing with the new murder charges. Someday they will go down together, and they will bury them side by side. To a few it means grief, to the law it's relief, but it's death to Bonnie and Clyde. Another thing I want to point out is they were not buried side by side. They weren't married. And Bonnie's family honestly did not thank Clyde for what he drugged their daughter through and what, like, they obviously painted him as the bad guy. And so keep that in mind. In early May, there's another family visit. Bonnie gives her mother the poem that I've just recited to you. She knows that they're going to die. She knows that there's no turning back. They meet with Clyde's father. They go to visit the Methvins, and law enforcement gets notified after the fact. The Methvins did not want to endanger their other children's family who were visiting at the time, so they didn't tell law enforcement. Cumi Barrow gets detained and gets put in jail with other family members for questioning. Ma Ferguson's not happy about that. She doesn't support that. Hamer stays real close to the Methvins. He's waiting for info from Ivy Methvin. The family members let Methvin know about the deal. Methvin brings Bonnie and Clyde to Shreveport. There he manages to escape. They go to Methvin's home where, Ivy told them that Henry wasn't there, but was expected to be back the next morning. And then they went and told Hamer. And so this is the end, guys. Like, this is the plan. So the posse gathers. We've got Frank Hamer, Manny Galt, Bob Alcord, Ted Hinton. Those are both FBI agents. Sheriff Jordan and Deputy Oakley. And the code is the old hen is ready to hatch, the chickens will come out tomorrow. So they choose a ambush spot on the road to the Methvin's property. One side was a hill that had a lot of brush and trees and bushes where they could hide. They carried an arsenal and they got set up before dawn. And so in the dark, they are setting up this ambush spot waiting for Bonnie and Clyde. So this was May 23rd, 1934. Clyde and Bonnie are ambushed and killed on a rural Louisiana road. And this is how it goes down. So Ivy was nervous. Ivy is the dad's name. Weird names back in the 30s. He gets used as a decoy. He cripples his truck on the side of the road so that Clyde would stop and hopefully help him, which he expected them to. He actually begged them to stop before they were all killed. He was very nervous about this. A gray Ford V8 gets spotted coming up the road. Clyde slows down for Ivy. He moves forward in front of Ivy to get out of the way of traffic. The movement caused the deputies to start firing, and Clyde actually takes a bullet right in the behind the ear. And then other open fired into the car for several minutes. Clyde's foot ends up leaving the pedal. The car rolls into the ditch. More shots get fired. It's believed that Clyde was either killed or incapacitated by probably that first shot. But Bonnie and Clyde are killed. Their bodies are completely destroyed, and evidence showed that neither one even had the chance to load and fire their own weapons. 1,000 rounds of ammo 1,000 rounds of ammo were found along with all kinds of things in the car. Locals combed the area for survivors. A tow truck pulled the car with the bodies already in it. Like, they didn't take the bodies out of the car. They just towed the car to the coroner. Gibson, Louisiana children got to see the car. Like, so they actually got to witness this procession. Somebody had yanked the blanket down and Clyde's messed up face was visible. Each body had over 24 bullet holes. So each 24 times Bonnie and Clyde were shot. Darby, if we remember, he was the former hostage who was the Undertaker. He was actually called in for assistance and did get to help with the body preparation of Bonnie and Clyde. The officer stories didn't quite match up. So there were some issues. Henry ends up, like, the press puts together that Methvin helped take them down. And so Methvin actually gets away with the sentence that he was serving at Easton Prison Farm, as well as the 2 Grapevine murders. Hamer claimed that it was hard to kill Bonnie, but he also told reporters that she did, in fact, smoke cigars. Clyde kind of gets this new fame as the new bad man of the Wild West. And so that kind of sums up our story. This picture here is that picture of Bonnie with the cigar in her mouth and the pistol on her hip. It's a very iconic picture. That link there on the website has a link to all of the pictures that were found on that camera. I suggest you check that out. But for me, it's a tragic story because Bonnie and Clyde were creative, intelligent people. Like, if they could have just waited out the Great Depression and, like, just starved a little bit in West Texas like their families did, and tried to find whatever odd jobs they could, by 1935, a lot of these New Deal programs were in place. There was the WPA and the works, like all of these different work programs where Clyde could have found work There were creative opportunities for artists where the federal government was actually paying for that kind of stuff. Bonnie was a prolific writer. They could have had successful lives and careers. Hell, the 1930s was the emergence of Hollywood as we know it. Like both of them would have been successful, I think, in Hollywood in various capacities. And so it's just so sad that society, to me, they were just left behind. They were poor white trash, and during the Great Depression, they didn't matter, and so they took what little entertainment they could and eked out a sustenance by robbing and killing. I'm not justifying that, and it does obviously, once again, sound like I'm romanticizing it, but there there weren't a whole lot of, like, in their minds. And as a young person, when you don't have the experience to know things will potentially get better, this is the lifestyle they chose. And so to me, it's a very, very mind-boggling and eye-opening story. And I draw it to parallels to today because, um, now we're very secure. We don't have these pockets of no law enforcement, kind of. But, out here, they spend a lot of time out here in the Panhandle and in Oklahoma and Texas. Um, and because of the lack of law enforcement. And, we just had 2 murders in this area by people who thought they could get away with it because of our lack of local competent law enforcement. And it didn't work out for them. So once again, this is my subject. I wanted to share this with you. I know this is a long lecture. Please, please watch it in snippets if you can. And if you have any questions or if you want to have a personal dialogue about this, feel free to reach out. I'm available all week. So, all right, have a great day, guys. Thank you. I'm going to eat my corn chips now because I'm starving. Goodbye.